Hey everybody, this is the outlining lecture. So usually, traditionally, I guess when you talk about outlining, it's something that you do as part of the pre-writing stage. So you'll do your brainstorming and then you'll take your brainstorm and you'll fold it into an outline. And if that works for you, I'm not trying to knock that. That's great. That's never worked for me. I oftentimes don't know exactly what my paper is going to look like until I've written it. And I think that based on conversations I've had with students, that's an experience that you guys have had as well. That the outline is occasionally helpful to get you focused and started, but that ultimately what you end up writing is kind of a different beast. So this is not the pre-writing outline that we're talking about today. Um, this is different. This is for when you've already written a paper. So when you've written a paper, the first step you need to do post writing that paper is turn around and read it out loud. Reading a paper out loud that you've recently written is a way of forcing yourself to slow down and actually look at all of the words that you wrote. You'll notice this too when you have written a paper and you're going to turn it in, and after you've turned it in, you go back and look at it, and there are these mistakes that are super obvious, and you're like, how on earth did I miss this when I was reading through it? And the answer is that you knew what you wrote, and because you knew what you wrote, you carried your expectations with you as you were looking at the paper. So you were reading what you expected to find, not necessarily what was actually there. A good way to avoid that is to read the paper out loud. It makes you slow down, it makes you look at every word, and in looking at every word, you catch those more obvious mistakes. So after you've written a paper and in kind of the free writing mode, you've read it out loud and you've done minimal editing, that's the point where we are for this video. So if you haven't done that yet, that's fine. Just make sure to keep in the back of your mind that this is a step for after you've done that minimal level of editing, which actually is an important point because we have to talk about the difference between editing and revising. So we use these two words interchangeably a lot. We don't differentiate that much, but I want to differentiate because these are two distinct steps that we're going to engage in a really in-depth way. You're going to do one level of revising for the first draft of this paper, which is just, whatever you're kind of used to. And then we're going to do another level of revising that's a whole separate grade that's much more in-depth, and that's going to be the final assignment that you turn in for this class. So editing is when you go through and you fix individual mistakes. These are small things, typos, comma errors, run-on sentences, and comma splices, and all that jazz, parallelism issues, surface level stuff that it can create misunderstanding, but usually it's just not formal or not technically correct, right? That's what we're looking at when we're looking at editing. A well-edited copy is a really good thing. It's like a sharply dressed individual at an interview. You want to present yourself very well, and making sure that you have said exactly what it is that you intended to say in the way that you intended to say it is a very important thing. So we're not talking about editing today, but it is something that matters a whole lot, and I think that the metaphor of being well dressed is an appropriate metaphor for editing. Revising is making improvements to the language, both on a word choice level and on a sentence structure level and on a larger organizational level. You're really looking at making sure that you've communicated or are communicating the appropriate meaning in the best way. It has a lot to do with word economy and sentence economy, and these are the things that doing an outline can help you with. So just to give you a quick example of the difference here, if we're editing the sentence, John gave my brother and I a new wagon, that doesn't need revising. It just, you're not supposed to say I there in the objective case. So John gave my brother and me a new wagon. Quick side note, the test here is if you remove the other person, which one would you use? So John gave me a new wagon makes a lot more sense than John gave I a new wagon. So the personal pronoun in the object position of the sentence is me. So that's an editing issue. A revising issue is if we had written a sentence like this. This new wagon, which initially belonged to John as he purchased it, was given to me and my brother by him, making it ours. Now, this is a terrible, clunky sentence. It's got some major structural issues. For some reason, the subject of our sentence is this, or this new wagon, if you want to be liberal with it. It's just so awkward and clunky, and it's basically the same sentence as the one prior to it. It's just written in kind of this faux academic language. So if we're going to revise this sentence, we'd want to we'd want to basically transform it piece by piece into the first sentence. So John gave my brother and me this new wagon. And then we could, from there we could probably reduce it further. John gave us this new wagon. John gave us a new wagon. There are various iterations and transformations we can do, but ultimately the point is we're making it simpler, we're making it clearer, we're making it more active by having our subject to be a person rather than an object. Those kinds of things are revising level things on a sentence level. You can also do revising level things on a much larger level, rearranging paragraphs, deleting whole paragraphs, making sure you have transitional paragraphs. There are a lot of things you can do for revising. One of those being the outline. So the origins of this assignment, and I use that word loosely, but the philosophy that kind of motivates it, it comes from dialectic. And dialectic basically just it's the counterpart to rhetoric, which is kind of the field that I study. And dialectic is when you are engaged in a conversation with somebody else, and you are both not trying to win an argument, but you're each representing different sides, and you are each both equally motivated to move towards the truth rather than moving towards the win. So even though it's oppositional and to a degree confrontational, it's still also cooperative because your ultimate goal is to discover the truth. That's a very idealized version of it. It don't happen that way often, but you get the idea. Anyway, one of the versions of dialectic was the Aristotelian school of peripatetics. And peripatetics was basically, it got its name from the parapets. So Aristotle and his students would walk along the waterside and walk up and down these long hallways and have conversations. And that was how they did education. And it's actually a pretty good model. This is something that is usually the goal of peer review, not that one student looks at another student's paper and says, yep, that looks great, or sits down and says, well, I wouldn't have said that, and tries to fix their grammar and make it basically their paper. The goal of peer review is that two people who are academic equals, the peer part is really important for getting people to open up and have that discussion. Sit down and have a discussion about the ideas and have a discussion about the structure and the arrangement and the goals. That doesn't happen all that often either, but that's the goal. So because of social distancing, we're not going to be engaging in any kind of direct peer review or any peripatetics, hopefully, either. There's not going to be that face-to-face conversation with a bunch of different people, but you can do it with yourself over time by sort of separating the process, which is a lot of when we talked about Peter Elbow and free writing, a lot of what he was talking about. You have two modes, the generative or productive mode, and you have the critical or the revising mode. And you can, by splitting your time, by working on producing something at one time and then coming back later to revise it, you can actually engage in a kind of self-conversation and a kind of self-peer review. Here's what that would look like. Why are we stuck? There we go. In the timeline. So you have to write a draft, right? And hopefully you're doing the free writing thing we talked about in a previous lecture with Peter Elbow. And so then you'll have to edit out the nonsense. If you're doing free writing, there's going to be some nonsense, just stuff that you don't need in there. Then once you've edited that nonsense out, you'll have most of the ideas you need for a paper, but they'll kind of be just sort of scraps strewn about. So you'll have to arrange them and fill in the gaps. And after that, you will have a paper, something that you can turn in, right? And so that's the point where I want you to start outlining. Once you have a paper, something that you think of as a final product, I want you to outline your old final product. When you outline your old final product, what you're basically going to be doing is you're going to be naming every paragraph. You're going to be naming every paragraph and all of the supporting pieces of information there. So in so doing, you'll create an overview of your paper that gives you that 1,000-foot view, so you can see I start here, then I go here, then I go here, and then I go here, and then I'm moving towards my conclusions, whatever they may be. As you look at that, you can find patterns. You can rearrange and outline at very low stakes. It's not like you're going through and moving whole paragraphs around that you might not remember where they originally were. It's just, shifting things around on the outline. Does this point work better if I have this other point before it? Here's my counter argument where I represent the views that I disagree with. Does it go better here or here? You have this kind of low stakes and high mobility way of moving these ideas around, and it lets you play with the overall structure of a paper in a way that clarifies that structure. So after doing that, then you can rearrange, and this is part of revision and when you should start revising your draft. So here's the pitch. So this isn't for a grade, so I have to make a pitch to try and get you to do it because I realize that a lot of you are not necessarily going to. I should rephrase that. I realize that necessarily a lot of you are not going to. However, I really do think that you would find this not just helpful, but also immediately useful for educating you on the topic of arrangement. The rubric that I grade the final paper with includes both local and global clarity. So we'll talk about that sentence level stuff, but also I'm really going to be looking for a very logical and rational and meaningful arrangement to your ideas. Things don't occur to us in a great order. Things occur to us as they occur to us, and that's kind of a mystery, and we don't know why. But it's not in the best order initially, or at least it rarely is. So this idea of rearranging is something that I'm going to be looking for. And it's difficult to do unless you can take that 1,000-foot view. That 1,000-foot view comes with the outline. It's produced by the outline. So if you do an outline, I can all but guarantee that it will be extremely helpful for you. It will improve your grade, but more importantly, it will teach you something about arrangement, about organization, and it'll help you do a better job of that here. All right, thanks so much, and fill out the Google form and turn in the journal. And also wash your hands well, stay safe and distant from everybody. Bye.